Hey, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of Boss Talks, episode 149. Today, our guest is John Casmon. He is out of, was it Ohio? I'm pretty sure. Yes. And he actually has quite a few layers to his, I guess, professional life. He's an investor in multifamily. He's currently doing a little bit of minor property, well, not minor, it's all very important property management of his own property, but also has some that he has hired out to other property management. But he also started a new business in restoration as well. And then, if that wasn't enough to do, he also does a podcast and live show, or video show, I should say. And he has me beat. He is approaching, I believe it was 800 episodes that he's getting close to, and been doing it for around 9 years, which is pretty phenomenal. We were just talking up before this that to hit 20 episodes is pretty, you're hitting the mark. Like, a lot of people don't get there. So to get up to the 800 level is pretty great. And I myself am only at 150-ish. So I have a ways to go. I hope I can stay the course and approach his number in the future, but we'll see if we get there. But John, he has a wealth of knowledge and experience and things to bring forth, especially the topics that he has been able to do on his own show around investment in multifamily. So getting his perspective as an investor in multifamily for those that he works with in the property management world is going to be a great thing to kind of walk through and ask questions about. So I'm excited to have John today. But before we get there, I'm Evan Happel, your host with Community Boss, and we have a great solution for you when it comes to your parking needs. So if you have anything in the parking world of managing your guests and residents and all their vehicles, maybe making some revenue, Parking Boss is the tool for you. So reach out. Let's talk if you need any help with that, enforcement, all the things. We got the tools for you. So we'll talk if you need that kind of help. But today it's about John and his intro music. We're going hardcore. We got Downstate. Kingdom is the song, I believe. And well, it's gonna speak for itself. So let's bring John to the show. All right, John. Good to have you here. Thanks for being on the show. I didn't know you before we started talking and being a guest, but I'm really glad we were able to connect and get you on here because I think you have some great things to add to the audience and insights to share. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, Evan, thank you for having me, man. I was waiting on that drop, the adrenaline in my soul. I was about to get super fired up, man. And I'm glad you cut off when you did. You would have got a different side of me. So all good.
No, yeah, it's definitely a high-powered song to come into. So thanks for sharing that. So what is it about that song, though? Why did you pick that one?
Yeah, it's actually a WWE wrestler's theme song, got in Cody Rhodes, and it's a really popular song. It's one of those things where my youngest son got into wrestling a couple years ago, and we went to SummerSlam and we saw him live, and that song just hits, man. It hits in general. It's a great song. Like, if you're working out, it's a great song to throw on. But when you can hear it and have 25, 45, 50,000 people sing along, whew, man, it gives you chills. And for SummerSlam, there was about 55,000 people there, all chanting that at the same time. So it was definitely a moment. So it was good times.
Yeah, I probably cut it off too soon. I should.
You did, but you would have had to go a whole minute if you didn't cut it off, because you would have had to at least get to the chorus.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'll have to go back and listen to it all just so that I can get really amped up for the rest of my day. Well, thanks for sharing that, and that's fun that you kind of share that with your son, and just that. I've never been to a WWE event. I'm sure it's quite the spectacle. They do a pretty good job of just getting the whole uh, crowd involved and just amped up for every single match. So that must have been a fun thing to do with your son too.
Yeah, I mean, when The Rock came back, we kind of both kind of got at least remotely curious for a little bit and kind of watched it, and he got really into it and made it a fun time. But yeah, it's fun entertainment. If you like that kind of thing. If you don't, I get it, but it's nice theater and definitely a lot of energy and emotion and fun spots. So certainly was a good time for all of us.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, as I shared previously, it's been a minute since we talked, so hopefully you remember. But there's a few questions I ask all my guests in the beginning, and one of them has to do with the topic of parking. Being that we have a solution that helps mitigate any issues with that, I want to know, and you being somebody that owns and invests in uh, multifamily, when it comes to the topic of parking, do you have any stories, tips, or things to share around that topic?
Well, I will tell you, if you're going to be an owner of multifamily apartments, you certainly want to think about parking because it's something that may not be as prevalent on your mind, but it comes up in every place. I remember my first apartment building was an 8 unit building. And it was really weird how the parking area was constructed. It's kind of like an L shape. And it was almost like a game where one car had to park here and then the other car had to park behind it, and they had to coordinate to figure out who had to move first and what time they needed to leave to figure out who went where. And it was just not an easy environment. You were talking about me playing a part-time property manager now. Well, that property doesn't even have parking, so
Oh,
I still
wow.
don't know where tenants park. Right, there's a street, and then I think there's a spot across the street where it's like a car repair shop. So I think some people park there. But yeah, parking can be a challenge. And on your apartment communities, sometimes there's not enough parking. You want to make sure there's compliance for parking, ADA compliance. You want to make sure now with EVs being so popular across the country, you want to understand that dynamic as well. So parking is something we're always looking into. And even beyond that, you have garages, covered parking. I'm in the Midwest, man. I used to live in Detroit. I'm from Cleveland. I've been in Dayton, lived in Chicago. I'm here in Cincinnati now. So the weather has always been an issue when it comes to parking, right? No one wants to
Yeah.
get out there and get the snow off their vehicle. And guess what? People tend to pay a premium to have that. So all those things kind of come in mind when it comes to parking.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the ones you do have parking, any major issues you've ever had with that specifically?
So the biggest issue I think we've had is some people believe that parking spots are theirs. So if you don't assign parking,
Hmm.
then people will assume their own parking. And if your guest comes over and parks in her spot, it can cause havoc. And these are kind of things that, as an owner, please don't bother me with this stuff. But I do recognize how important this is for my property manager because she's having to deal with this stuff on a daily basis, right? So those
Right.
are things where we ended up having to come up with some parking rules to work with someone to assign spots, to paint numbers in the parking spots, and kind of come up with a plan of how you're going to handle that, an area where visitors can park so that they're not taking these spots for those owners and the folks who lease these units. But parking is something that definitely is important to make sure you understand how that community functions.
Yeah, absolutely. And remind me, you have kind of a spectrum of communities. What are the, I guess, different sizes you have? What's the largest that you currently hold?
The largest one we currently hold, I'm trying to think. I think it's 132 units.
Okay.
There may nope, there's a 133 unit one. So
Okay.
that's the that's the largest one.
Yeah.
We have one that's 132, one that's 133 units, and then we got a couple mid-sized ones. 40 unit building. We've got a 100 unit building as well, and then I mentioned I bought a couple smaller properties. Bought a mixed-use 3 unit building, medical office facility as well. A couple of smaller properties like that.
Okay. And when it comes to those, are they a garden style or mid rises? You got a
Garden
mix?
style apartments, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And that can be its own headache because you don't have the luxury of a garage with a
Yeah.
gate, and not to mention, not to say that that always keeps everyone out, because it's still, there's workarounds. But yeah, garden styles, if you don't have necessarily ways to really mitigate the use of it, people could just be on site using up parking for your residents, and they always get mad. So but yeah, you're right. Guest parking is like the actually like why we exist. That's how we started, was really just a solution for that. So
Yeah.
that typically is a challenge. So
And it's something property managers don't want to deal with, right? Like
no,
no owner that I know that I've ever talked to has ever come to their property manager to say, "Hey, how's everybody feeling about parking right now? Is that everybody happy with parking?" Like, don't get me wrong, sure they are happy that people are happy, but we care about revenue, right? We're worrying about
yeah,
occupancy. Hey, how's
hmm,
traffic? Are we getting leases? Are we getting applications? Are we handling maintenance tickets requests, right? We care about the operations of the building. When it
yeah,
comes to the parking lot, to us, that's the thing. Maybe you've got to go out there and redo the parking lot and reseal it. But most of us don't get excited about that. It's a
no,
cost, right? It's an
yeah,
expense, and it doesn't necessarily add to the experience. We know that it helps the curb appeal, but when it comes to actual parking management and parking solutions, most of us don't really want to deal with that. So having somebody who can think about that and help us understand how it adds value is always something that's needed.
oh yeah, yeah. You can really get into it. It can add value. That's the problem. Is it is like an expensive undertaking, the concrete, the everything. So it's like we want less, not more, but you can make money off it. But the other thing is having the right tools for it is super important, because it can either take all your time and then you do nothing with it, and then it's like, okay, well, it's a disaster, but I'm not touching it. Or have good tools and it could be a lot better, for everybody. So yeah, it is like you said, it's not exactly something most people are wanting to tackle. But what I've learned is, if you don't, it starts affecting your online reviews, it starts affecting your retention, because if you don't have appropriate parking or it's a nightmare, people will leave over it. They will literally get out of and you start losing residents. So it can be a problem. But thanks for sharing your insights there. I appreciate it. And then final question, when it comes to your caffeinated beverage of choice, what's your go-to?
Man, that's a good one. So I'm not really a coffee drinker. If I do drink, it's going to be like a vanilla latte or something like that. Um, I like to say this on air, but I do drink a like an energy drink.
Okay.
Normally either as a mid-afternoon pick me up, or sometimes it's a pre-workout, replacement. So typically that's gonna be a Celsius. I know all my doctor and nurse friends are like, you can't drink those, they're terrible for you, right? So I don't drink them all the time, but yes,
Yeah.
I will engage in one or two at a moment.
Okay. Got it. So it's a latte though, if you do have coffee.
Yeah, something lighter is what I will drink. Yeah.
Yeah. Not straight black. You don't like the
No, no,
the
no, no. That's hardcore, man. I'm good.
too hardcore. Got it. Got it. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Well, I want to just jump right into your background, how you got into apartments. I mean, you got into it as an investment, and pre doing that, what were you doing, and how did you even get into this world?
Yeah, so I worked in advertising and marketing for 15 years. I worked on some big brands, Nike, Coors Light, Mountain Dew, worked at General Motors. And, really while I was at GM, I was there when we went through bankruptcy. So I experienced that firsthand. And I started to kind of think about my career, what my opportunities were, and realized I wanted to take more control. I ended up moving to Chicago, working at an advertising agency, but I really had the intention of starting to invest in real estate. And for me, real estate was a thing that I felt if you had basic math skills, you could figure it out and make it work. I mean, I had known people who made money in real estate who didn't seem that sophisticated to me. So I'm like, all right, I could probably figure this out if I just spend a little time, reading books, listening to, it wasn't even podcasts back then, man, but it was just like
Yeah.
listening to audio books or, just tapes or whatever
Sure.
it was. I'm not that damn old, but listening to recordings. Um, and, reading articles, going to events, stuff like that. And in short, as I was doing that, I read a lot of people talk about apartments and getting into apartments and wishing they started sooner. So that kind of piqued my interest. The agency I was working for ended up going bankrupt right at the time that I was getting some good momentum. And that made me realize that, all right, while this is working, I bought a 2 unit building and a 3 unit building, and I had just closed on an 8 unit building. But when that happened, I realized, man, I'm stressed out. I don't know. I just, I made mistakes. And the biggest mistake was I was buying these properties, but I was using all of my money and I was essentially cash flow poor
Mm,
because all the money I had saved, I bought these properties. So if anything happened at a property, I didn't have the money in my reserve accounts to cover it. And I remember
mm,
like, I got hit with this something with the city, they made me repair this lintel. I didn't know what a lintel was. And I had to do this research. And I'm like, oh, but it's the window, the outside of the window seal. So I had to go out there and spend like thousands of dollars fixing all this stuff, man, that, I was not planning on investing. So when that agency went bankrupt, I kind of had to take a step back and say, okay, I know real estate works. I've seen these properties increase in value. I've seen the rents go up, but there's something flawed in my strategy, and that really warmed me up to the idea of partnering with other people and raising capital for these deals.
okay. So now moving forward, you don't go into things solo. You kind of have a group of investors.
On most deals, like I mentioned, I did buy a couple of deals solo, but even there, the big difference is we're never depleting all of our assets on a deal, right? That's what I used to do. I used to save everything and everything went in on that property and we just crossed our fingers. Now we really mitigate our risk by partnering with others. And it's really a win-win situation because now we can come in, they get all the benefits of investing in real estate without the headaches of being a landlord. And we get a chance to leverage our knowledge and expertise, go out there, run these deals while still being able to provide returns for ourselves and other investors.
Okay. So you act more as a like an asset manager, but also are personally invested.
That's right.
Okay. Got it. That's cool. And you started this, what was the year you kind of got into this?
2017.
Okay. So around the time you started doing your podcast. That's interesting. So you're almost documenting what you're learning on air with people.
Yeah, and it's very intentional, right? So that time frame, part of what it was this, man. I didn't think people would want to invest with me, right? So I
Mm,
had this idea that, okay, hey, I keep running out of my money, and I know this thing works, but I need access to more capital. The problem was I didn't think anybody would want to invest with me. I I did a couple deals, right? It's not like I'd been doing this for 10 years. I'd done a couple
right.
deals. I had some success. I also knew some of that was market driven. Um, I didn't have a bunch of rich friends, I didn't come from a rich family or anything like that. So I didn't know if people would actually invest with me. So that was my biggest barrier was like, can I raise money? And even if I could raise money, like, do I want to raise money? Like, do I trust
Yeah.
myself to go out there and manage other people's money and their investment? So it made me kind of really decide to do something big. And that first big step was put yourself in a position to grow and scale. And in order to do that, you've got to be able to protect these partners. So I
Mm,
focused on education first, right? Educating myself. I launched my podcast. Back then it was called Target Market Insights. Today it's called Multifamily Insights. And I launched that podcast to help me connect with other investors. I wanted to learn from these folks. I hired a mentor and a coach, and he kind of gave me some guidance. And this is a guy who, when I met him, he had done about $7 million in real estate. Now he's done $2.7 billion in real estate, right?
wow.
So I watched him grow and scale that portfolio. And that made me say, okay, wait a minute. There's some lessons here. There's some things that I can adjust. So as you're surrounding yourself with the right people, that really allows you to shift your mindset. So even though I didn't know if raising money would be a fit for me, What I didn't know is that I could educate myself to the point and surround myself with the people that could put me in a position to do this successfully.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So, what is your advice in the best ways to get started in apartment investing
Oh
for
man,
those?
listen, yeah. Yeah, lots of ways, man. First is this. You gotta fix the mindset first and foremost, right? Most people make the mistake of thinking that only the uber rich can invest in apartments. That is
Mm,
not true. That is simply not true. Everyday people like you and I are investing in these apartments. The ones you drive down, the 200 unit buildings, 300 unit buildings, 100 unit buildings, 20 unit buildings. Everyday people are doing that. You do not have to be a mega multi-millionaire to own these properties. You can work with groups like ours, join your resources together and invest. So one is the mindset of just knowing it's possible. Then you get into the how. How do you do this? Well, one is going to be through the networking. It's the education. Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are you learning? And the who. This is a who, not how situation, right? So who can help you invest in apartments? Is it a broker? Is it a potential partner? Is it a mortgage lender? Is it a property manager? Who can partner or help you and guide you through that process? It might be a coach or mentor. So finding those individuals is key. And we help people all the time, right? We help people invest in our deals. We also coach people to do this themselves. So finding that who is critical to get started, but it all starts with your mindset. You have to ask better questions of yourself. And one of the things I tell people all the time, ask yourself how, right? And when you ask how, what I mean is, if you were to say, let me give you an example here. Evan, you need $1 million to buy a property. Whether you have it or not, most people would stop and say, well, I don't have $1 million. I don't have $1 million to invest in a property. I wasn't planning on that. So, but if you start with, well, how can I invest $1 million? Right? Well, how can I get $1 million? And then if you can very quickly go from how, from who to how, from who, right? Instead of how, well, who do I know that can either raise $1 million or help me get $1 million? Who has done it? Who has raised $1 million for deals? Now this becomes really easy where you can identify the solutions. And you have to start with the how, because if you don't, for most people, they shut it down. You tell them that and they shut down the opportunity immediately. So when people listening probably heard you talk about apartment investing, is, oh, I can't do apartment investing, and they moved on, right? You just lost two listeners. Um, because they're like, well, oh, I can't do that. That's too much. That's like maybe a house, maybe I can do a rental, right? So people, they go with what's more tangible. So when you start talking 100 unit building or 200 unit buildings, that may feel very far and distant for them. But start by saying how. Well, how could you do it? If you partner with someone who had already bought 100 unit buildings, do you think you could do it then? Maybe, right? If you had access to capital and you were on the team, or, you start to open up the possibility. And once you have the possibility, now you can start to think about who makes this a realistic opportunity for you. And that's really the biggest key here, is really change your mindset to, how is this possible for someone like you, which it is. And I've seen people who have had very little in assets. One person knows negative, had a negative net worth, and they were still able to get in and invest in apartments. And I've
Hmm.
seen people who have had millions of dollars do this. I've seen people with absolutely no experience in real estate get into this space. I've seen people who've been doing this for 20 years. Now, the question and the reality I want to give you is, if you have no experience and no money, you got to be willing to work really hard and give up more, right? That's just the reality. You're not gonna like that, right? But the truth is, you can't come into the table with nothing and expect to get everything. So that is the one caveat to that. I don't want to sell someone a pipe dream that, no money down, get rich in real estate overnight. No, no, no. That's BS.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to understand that value equation. And real estate really comes down to two things: it's deals and money. And if you can pair deals with money, you can invest in real estate.
Interesting. Well, and one thing that I mean, I have not dove into this topic myself, really. I'm very curious, but I just have not spent the time to really understand how to invest. So I need to start listening to your show.
Yeah.
Um, but is it as easy as, so for instance, from net worth standpoint, I have a home. It's increased in value. I have equity. Is it things like equity that can then be transferred into something that could be invested into multifamily, for instance?
There are lots of ways of investing, and some of the most creative people in the world will figure out ways to tap into any assets you have and be able to leverage it to invest. Here's how most people do this, right? So for most people, you're looking at one of two things. The first question you're going to ask yourself is, do you want to be active? Meaning, do you want to be the person either in charge or part of the team in charge of making the decisions? If you say yes, then we're going to go down a path of, okay, here's what that means. You're then going to have to sign on the loan. You're going to have to meet the bank's requirements or figure out however you're going to finance this deal. And you're going to be the one finding the property management and overseeing the entire operation, right? You may say, hey, you know what? I don't really have a lot of experience. I want to get my feet wet. I really just want to make a return. I don't want to be the day-to-day guy. How can I still invest? Well, in that case, you may be looking to be more passive. And in that
Mm,
case, when you're a passive investor, you can simply invest in deals and not have to do anything else. What you're going to do is you're going to vet operators, you're going to vet opportunities. Someone like myself, I'm going to send you a deal. You take a look at that deal. You take a look at my background. You get a sense of who I am, get comfortable with me and my team, with our approach. And if you like the deal, you raise your hand and say, yep, hey, I want to invest in this deal. You make that investment, and you're all done. It's that simple. So, where you get the capital from, most people have it in savings. A lot of folks will say, and let me just say this, right? One big barrier people might have is, John, it sounds great. I don't have the money to invest right now, right? And that may be so. Here's where most people get the money to invest in deals. They may have it in savings, which you may or may not have. But if not, if you've ever worked a job and left that job, you may have an old 401k. And a lot
mm,
of times our listeners and our investors, they're not thinking about that, right? Because it's just kind of sitting in some old retirement account. But you can actually turn that old 401k into a self-directed IRA. And you can use that fund or those funds to invest in anything you want that's permissible. And that could be gold, that could be real estate, that could be stocks, that could be cattle. Like you can invest in a lot of different things
mm.
with those funds, and you get to choose. You're not limited now to the S&P 500 or to the index funds that were pre-approved by that previous custodian. You now take over the direction of that asset and you get to choose. So a lot of our investors will take that. They'll take those old 401k funds that they weren't really thinking about, use that to invest passively, learn more about investing through this vehicle. So now they're asking me questions and they're seeing how we operate. And now they're becoming a smarter investor, whether they want to continue down that path, being passive, or they want to take the reins and try their role at being an active investor in the future.
Okay. So do the returns on real estate and multifamily, do they exceed like uh what you would get out of a 401k? Like if it's an average of 6 to 12 per year, we'll say, depending on your risk and all that kind of stuff. What should people expect if it's a good deal, obviously, um, as a return on their investment?
Yes, my attorneys will pop in right here and be like,
This is his
right with
opinion. This
nah,
is not
every caveat in the world. I mean, the first thing I know when I read in our prospectus, it says, past results do not indicate future results and
sure. Yeah.
all of that stuff, right? But I get the hypothetical question.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll tell you. When we look at deals, our general thesis and what we're looking for, typically what we call value add B class deals. And that just means properties that are desirable. Think about where the schools are good, not necessarily like the elite schools, but good
Mhm.
schools where people want to send their kids, right?
Yeah.
And your workforce lives here. So think your firefighters, your police officers, your teachers, your post office workers. These are folks who have good jobs, blue collar jobs, white collar jobs, but these are folks who are the backbone of this country, right? So these are the apartments where these individuals will live, work, and play. And in that scenario, we are buying these properties with a vision of doubling someone's money over a 5 or 6 year period. Okay.
Mm.
So when you get to the annual return, annualized, that's basically about a 15 to 20% annualized return, is what that looks like for a 5 to 6 year hold period. So The market has been a little more rocky over the last couple of years. We've had a couple of deals that have absolutely crushed it, even in the worst of the economic environment. But for us, we felt pretty good about our portfolio's performance, and we'll stack that up against anybody's. But I would say most folks in the space are probably going to be a little more cautious and say, "Hey, we can still probably hit those returns, but maybe it takes another year or two to deliver on that."
Okay. And then are you of the mindset of like holding for 5 years and selling that asset after making improvements? Or do you hold on to it for the long term?
No, we definitely want to exit. So we typically look at a 3 to 7 year sales period or hold period. Usually it's going to be around 4 to 5 years is what we target, but that's going to differentiate based on market conditions, right? We never want to sell in a down market, but we also don't want to be greedy. We have to keep in mind where things are going. So our role is really to understand, hey, but how are we able to drive success? Where's the opportunity today? What is the market and the horizons telling us that's coming, and when should we adjust based on those factors? So for us, I know some people love to hold forever. The truth of the matter is, many of us are investors, and there is this notion that after a while, you have to think about the velocity of that investment and keeping your money in a deal after you've already kind of extracted all the value that can be extracted. It really is an opportunity cost and missing out on other deals and other opportunities. So we try to balance those factors while still being patient for our investors.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks for sharing about that. I mean, I know there's so much more to it, and this is dipping the toe in the whole topic. But obviously, if people are very interested, they can kind of dive into the topic more with your show, Multifamily Insights, and you can find that on Apple Podcasts. And you have a YouTube channel as well.
Yep, absolutely. You just go ahead and search my name, John Casmon. You should come across it.
Yeah. Well, there's quite a catalog, so I'm pretty sure he's hit many of the topics surrounding this in that. So you definitely can learn a lot there. But thanks for sharing that. And when it comes to being an investor and working with property management or doing it yourself, um, what is the best way or the way you should be viewing this, in your opinion, when it comes to being an investor and the relationship with property management
Yeah,
to make
that's a
it
great
a good relationship?
That's a really good question, right? I think one of the fallacies that I see in our industry is people oversimplify how easy it is to just get in, hire a property manager, and collect profits. That is simply not the case. You have to be able to operate, okay? You got to execute, you have to manage your team, and you have to be able to recognize where there's challenges in the business. So, one of the things that we like to do is, first of all, step back before you make an investment, whether that's as a passive investor with a group like mine or actively doing your own deal. Ask the right questions. So we put together a guide. It's 7 questions you must ask before investing in apartments. And this guide covers a number of topics from, the market selection to the team to the property itself. But coming back to your question on the team, with the property managers, you have to first and foremost ask yourself, is this the right property manager for this asset? When I bought my 8 unit property, I reached out to a really well respected property manager that I knew, very well known in the area, and he didn't operate in this particular part of the city, so he referred me to someone else, and this person was great. They had a great track record, great rating. I hired them. They did not do a good job at this property. Okay, here's why. They were used to managing more class A assets. So think your more luxury high end finishes, folks who are making $100,000 and more. And this was more of a C class property. Okay, this was had half the residents were on Section 8. There was trash at the property all the time. One lady told me she couldn't pay rent because she had a ghost in her apartment. I'm dealing with that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So those are the kind of tenants I was dealing with here. And they were not very good and not very savvy on how to manage that. And the truth of the matter is, it takes a different mindset and a different approach. So while they were really good at the Class A stuff, they were not very good at the Class C stuff. So you can't just blindly look at someone and their reputation and say, okay, this property management company is great, let's hire them. You've got to make sure there's a fit. Do they have the experience and the expertise to manage the kind of property you are looking to have them manage? That is step number one. And then we talk about the actual rapport. How do you put them in a position to be successful? How do you make sure that they're able to hit your KPIs or your key performance indicators so that you're profitable and you're making money and you can identify any trouble spots that may be coming up on the horizon? So that is something where you want to sit down and build that rapport, get clarity. A lot of owners assume that that property manager knows what they mean and knows what to do and knows
Mm,
what you're thinking. That is not the case. Okay.
yeah.
Let me give you another example here. I've got a property manager. She's a rock star. She's awesome. However, she fixates on occupancy, and rightfully so. It's one of the most important metrics that we have, right? She's
Hmm.
got 30 years experience, and I'm sure most of the owners she's dealt with over that time frame have wanted to focus on occupancy, right? We got to make sure this place is filled up because that's how we make money. Here's the rub. If you fixate solely on occupancy, all the solutions are now around what? Well, we need to either market more, or we need to lower the rent, or we need to do concessions. But that may not be a real reflection of what your challenges are at that property. Maybe the rent is perfect, and the reason your occupancy is not where it needs to be is for some other reason. Or maybe you don't need to be at 99% occupancy. It's okay to have a little bit of vacancy. And most underwriters, right, from a lending standpoint, most underwriters are going to assume at least a 5% occupancy or vacancy anyway. So you
Yeah.
being at 99%, they're not even going to give you credit for that, right? It's good
Right.
for cash flow, but you have to keep some of these things in mind. So we had to sit and say, hey, listen, while occupancy is really important, what I'm actually focused on is net operating income. Okay.
Mm,
My bottom line. So if you are giving the farm away to keep this place filled up, but we're giving crazy concessions, that doesn't help my bottom line. I'd rather be vacant another week or two, right?
right.
If our expenses are going up because we're having to turn units or do something else, that doesn't help the bottom line. So I needed them to understand how to think about it from a business standpoint and what my real motivating factors are so that they have more tools in their tool belt to recognize what's happening. Most property managers are not business managers. Okay.
Mm,
They don't understand cash flow. They don't understand that business side to the extent that the owner or the asset manager does. So you need to bring that to the table and give clear direction. Again, there can be a disconnect when you're working with property managers because they're usually incentivized based on what? Especially when you talk about leasing agents. Well, when they place a tenant, they usually get a bonus,
hmm.
right? So you get a first month's rent bonus goes to a leasing agent. Maybe they get a bonus on renewals. So that's what we've trained them as an industry. We've trained them to say, hey, these are the two most important things. It's not speed to resolve, maintenance tickets.
Mm,
It's not the number of showings you have. It's not necessarily the number of five-star reviews that you get. Is right. So it's
yeah.
not these other things that we all know are also important, but they're not incentivized to focus on those things. They're not incentivized typically to focus on NOI. So
Hmm.
for them, even though we don't talk about occupancy, a lot of times we don't set up the incentive structure to reflect that. So just building that rapport and that relationship where you're all aligned, it's absolutely critical. And it's something I think every apartment investor needs to focus on.
Yeah. Do you think that there's, to a degree, I know you're talking about NOI, but um, is there a fixation on budget sometimes? Like being a supplier and going and talking to a property manager, what we always run into is, oh, it's not in my budget.
Definitely not in
Not in
budget.
my budget.
Yeah.
It's not in my budget. Not in my budget. Can't do it. I have a problem, but it's not in my budget. Um, do you think that that becomes a barrier for them to actually do what they need to do on property? They just get fixated on the budget instead of thinking about how can we work through this? How can we um, move things around or whatever? I don't know. Like what is it that you would say about that?
There's two layers to that comment, right? So the first layer is budget, right? And the practical budget. Let's just use marketing as an example, and I'll go back to my occupancy discussion, right? Let's just say your occupancy is low, you need to get it up. Okay, well, the levers you pull, this is where it's going to vary based on your property manager. Most property managers will say we need to increase the marketing budget, right? That and it makes sense. However, I go back and push and say, well, wait a minute now. Do we know that that's the issue? I know we don't have the occupancy we want, but maybe we're getting plenty of interest and we're just not converting these leases. Maybe um maybe we're just not showing well. Maybe we got enough people who are, coming and they're showing, they're taking a look at it, but there's something with the property or something that maybe we're not communicating as clearly. Maybe it's competition. Maybe we need a better concession package. Maybe we're not getting any traffic. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes the ads may be running in the wrong spot. I can't tell you. I had one property where I couldn't find our ad. So I'm like, well, how are other people finding it if I can't even find it? I'm on the website. You telling me you paid and then realized, oh, there was a mistake and they linked the wrong thing, right? So, but they went to, we got to spend more money before really digging into solving what the real problem is, right? So when it comes to vendors, what happens a lot of time is we have our budget set for the year. And there's I promise you, no operator I've ever met has put a line item for new vendors pitching something that we weren't thinking about. Like, that's not a line item, right? Hey, we don't know, but I'm sure somebody's gonna come pitching something that's unique. Let's just keep a line item for that. That's not a reserve line item we keep. So what most vendors have to do is figure out how they add value, right? And there's two layers of value. There's value to the investor, the apartment owner themselves, and there's value to the property manager. I'll give you a couple of examples. One we brought on was I forget how you phrase it. It's like they do compliance insurance for tenants, right? So most places they want renters to have renters insurance. Well, they provide that, but it's awesome because we can pretty much have it at move in. It actually trims down the back and forth between the tenant and the property manager, where they have to go bring them proof that they got the compliance. It's done. We have it for you. It's automatic. And there's a revenue share model that we take as owners. So it's actually a lower cost than that most tenants would get in the open market. And we get a revenue share. And the property manager doesn't have to keep going back and forth asking his tenant to come bring in proof and make it easy for them, right? So that's a win-win scenario that works. Another example that I've seen is when people really have an issue that can be solved. If you can recognize that issue and you can bring that to the forefront, then I think you can get some traction. Let's use your example with parking. If you have gone on, let's call it a property management or a property's website, or reading their reviews, and people are complaining about parking, and you come to them and say, hey, I saw, some of the reviews you guys had, and I was actually just looking at the parking lot here. This is actually something that we help people with. Would you guys have interest in learning more? If they know they have an issue and you're helping them crystallize that issue, and you can even quantify what that may be doing to their business, now you got me open-minded, right? If I don't see how this adds value to me and to my team right away, that's the easy shut off. I mean, I just, hung up on a vendor before we jumped on, trying to sell me something I didn't need, right? He couldn't get to the value to me right away, right? Like, nope, I don't see value, I'm out. And we're all busy. Everyone's busy and everyone's pitching. Everybody's got a solution. You've got to figure out how to help that person. What most vendors do is they come in pitching themselves and highlighting all their stuff. And I don't care what your little widget or gadget does. No one does. That PM is swamped dealing with tenants harassing her about stuff. The maintenance guys complaining about stuff. She's got a regional manager boss who's on her ass about something. And she's got an investor she's trying to cater to, right? She's got 4 constituents, and that's before all of her current vendors get on her about whatever else is going on at the property, right? So she's got 5 stakeholders who are on her tail about all these different tasks and things she's been asked to manage. She's asked to be superwoman, right? She's got to manage all these people and look like a superstar to get the tenants' issues resolved quickly and efficiently, make sure the investor or the owner is happy with the way the property is running, manage up to her boss to make sure she's off her tail, make sure the maintenance dude's happy, he's not complaining about the number of tickets that came through, and it's getting close to the first of the month and unit turns and it's about to get busy, right? there's a lot on their plate. So you as a vendor coming in and being, Superman and telling me how great your widget is, they don't believe you and they don't care. But
Yeah.
if you can tell them how it's going to make their life a little bit easier, whoa, or it's going to position them to be even better with those same key stakeholders I mentioned before. Now you got my attention, right? Because if I'm drowning trying to manage these tenants and following up with this and doing that, and you say, "Hey, I've got something I can actually help you." Okay, tell me. Let me hear it. All right, now you got my attention. So I think part of it is just the presentation, and that's just a kind of a sales thing. But I
Hmm.
think the presentation of it, the budget is just an easy way to end the conversation. We can always make budget for something that's going to
Sure.
make us money, right? I've never heard someone say there's no budget to make more money like that. That doesn't exist.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's definitely just a knee jerk reaction to shut somebody down, obviously. Like if they really needed it, really wanted it, they would just uh they'd find a way, right? Especially if they knew that it was going to fix their problem and then add value, whether it's through payments or, actually generating revenue. Why would budget be the problem? We can
Well,
make
and it's
money.
and it's also so it's a lot nicer to say than telling you to your face, I don't see the value in the product or service you're selling me,
Yeah,
which is the real answer I think 90% of them have.
sure.
And it's just much easier to say, we don't have the budget for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To say that, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and and maybe they do see the value, but they don't strongly enough to be able then to go to their boss to argue it, right? Like they want it, but they don't know how to sell it to the other person. So they're just like, yeah, I guess this is going to be next year, and then I can just put it in the budget. Therefore, it's easier to sell it or
Yeah, and
whatever.
don't get me wrong, there's obviously times, depending on what time of year it is and all those things, where, hey, this might be an easier sell to get in next year, or we are towards the end of the year in our budget. But I would say, generally speaking, that's one of the things that we talked about the business with the restoration side. That's one of the things that, we've had to learn as well, is that, people want to be sold on solutions if they're real solutions for their problems. But if you're just another vendor, like they don't have time for you, they're overwhelmed. So you
Right,
got to
right.
really figure out how you add value to them. And I think a lot of sales professionals do themselves a disservice by just really focusing on themselves and not
Hmm.
how they're making someone else's job easier, or they they don't really understand that value proposition, because we're not saying there's no value. They're just saying, hey, this is not that valuable that I need to go get my boss on board. I see
Right,
value, could work, but I'm not about to champion this. I'm not about
right,
to put my name on this. So
right.
that's where I think that disconnect is.
Yeah, yeah. The the amount of time and effort to convince somebody else or even implement this has to be overshadowed by the value that's being
There you
added.
go. There you go. That's exactly it.
Yeah. No, it's true. And there was actually another show I recently watched where there was a person, I don't know if they were personally an investor or they were just a COO of like property management or something like that. But they were talking a lot about that topic and that telling me you're so great, but not really having concrete examples of how you're going to bring value or make our life better. Uh, we're not going to buy it. Like, why?
You got to keep in mind too, they get pitched so often,
Yeah.
and everyone pitches them with the greatest things in sliced bread. You know what I mean? Like, whether it is a software, or it's you know anything for an additional amenity, like they're always getting pitched, right? Especially if you have a large apartment community and you manage 300 units, or you're a large property management company and you manage 10,000 units. Like, they're getting pitched all the time. So they typically have a process. You got to go through the vendor approval process. And like, you're really going to have to, stand out to these people because they've seen it and they're a bit jaded. And they also
Hmm.
know, and here's the other thing, man. There's a book I was reading. It's called Jolt, and the Jolt effect. And it's about sales. And one of the concepts it gets into is when you're in an organization like that, no one wants to be the one that takes on the risk for doing something new that is different from status quo if it fails, right? Whatever status quo is, even if it's nothing, but if you implement something that fails and you are the champion of it, that is going to hurt your reputation. And
Right.
that's the other rub you have, especially when you talk about property managers who may not see the upside in championing an idea like this. Like, if it works, okay, is this the kind of thing that's going to earn me a promotion? Maybe not. But if it doesn't work, man, this could get me fired. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like, so that's when we think of value, again, a lot of times we're thinking about it from the perspective of, monetary and what we do, but it's like, put yourself in a PM shoes. Would you champion an idea that has moderate upside for you personally, but maybe has big downside if it really derails something that's already working? I mean, it's gonna, it could make you look bad, especially if there's an implementation or you have to change softwares, right? And those are kind of real things that they don't get stated. And that's why just telling you, hey, budget is an easier answer, when the real
Right.
answer is, hey man, if this is not about to make me look like a superstar and help position me to assistant regional manager or something like that, like, why would I champion this?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. This just sounds like a lot of work. Why
That's
would
what I
I?
heard. That's what I'm hearing. You asking me to do one more thing outside of the six other things I already had on my plate for the day.
Yeah. Oh, more software. Oh, cool, cool,
Oh
cool,
yeah,
cool,
that because
cool.
that's what we
Yeah.
need. Yeah, that's the problem. That's it. Yep. We don't have enough software. That's why we're not filling these units. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
If we had more software that I had to manage on top of managing this asset and the people,
Yeah.
then yeah, you're right. This would all be better.
Yeah. Why didn't I think of that? Yeah.
Oh, and I got to learn the software. Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And then teach it to everybody else. Got it.
Yeah. No, yeah, it is a challenge, and that there is an overload of solutions. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with any of the conferences out there, if you've ever been to like Apartmentalize or anything like that, or Optech or NMHC or anything like that, but they have their trade shows
Yep.
and all the solutions, and we're one of them. And it's interesting because the decision makers largely avoid the trade show. It's kind of like property managers and regionals. They might go to the trade show, but they aren't always the decision maker that they're wanting to talk to, like a supplier, for instance. And it's because they don't want to be pitched. The decision maker doesn't want to be pitched by everybody, right? Like, so they avoid them. So there's a whole thing on trade shows and their effectiveness, because the people that you need to talk to kind of just don't go to them.
Yeah. It's. I think in general, I mean, definitely trade shows, but in general, you've got to figure out where there's mutual benefit, right? If you go somewhere and yeah, it's great for you pitching this audience, well, eventually they're going to learn, like, okay, I didn't get as much value out of this as I would have thought I would have gotten, so I'm not going to go. And I can see other people got a lot of value, but that doesn't really help me. And that's where it becomes a bit of a challenge on, networking and these kind of things. But I would also say, you know, again, I'll go back to what we were talking before. People always want to make more money, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you change that conversation where it's less about software and more about kind of a proven system to drive efficiency and drive revenue, I mean, you'll get everyone's ears every day of the week, if you can prove that and demonstrate that. But to me, it's not the software. It's just, do you want to make more money? Here's how we're going to do it. Okay.
Right. Right.
Okay. Yes.
Right.
I mean, that's our job. My job is, we're doing syndications. My number one job is to help this property make more money. And we are open to every idea and concept that allows us to do that. So it's not that I'm going to sit at a trade show to find that, but yeah, when I'm bringing on partners, that's part of the knowledge bank I'm hoping that they bring to the table is, hey, for that, we talk about vetting, right? I want to hire a property management company that has experience creating value for these properties. And they know what strategies work. They know which upgrades to make. They know which ones to avoid. They know what software allows them to drive efficiency or to look at data in a way that gives us market insights to stay ahead of our competition. That is always welcome, right? That's always welcome. Um, but if you can't quickly tie the value to the bottom line, that's where you're going to lose some people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I appreciate your insights for sure. And we didn't directly address it, but the reason why you've done things like the podcast and stuff has, been to increase your visibility. And so, like I said, you started the podcast the same time you started doing investing. So, how has that helped your personal brand? How do you see that helping other people if they not that everybody has to be a podcaster because like we said, there's a lot of failure in that. You got to have a plan and a reason for it and be passionate about whatever you're doing in order to make it work. But yeah, how do you tackle your like having a strong brand and how have you seen that be successful for you?
Well, we're living in a world where I did an interview recently, and the guy called it, we're in a trust recession. And he's spot on. When you think about the economy, you talk about politics, fake news, AI, bots, so much is going on that people are very leery about trusting others. So when you
Mm,
think about content and branding, people do business with individuals they know, like, and trust. So
yep.
building that is essential. And building a personal brand is one of the most effective ways of building that trust. That comes from showing up, time and time again, consistently over months, over years, for people to get to know who you are, to know what you stand for, to know your philosophies, to know your beliefs. That is one of the ways they can get to know you, even if they've never met you in person. So right now we're doing this over, this live stream, but we haven't shook hands and, met in person, right? So this is a way to get to know people. And podcasting, doing video interviews, blogging, being on social media, it's all the same thing, right? I mean, the mediums always change, but at the end of the day, it's marketing. Okay, it's public relations. It's building a personal brand, and that always has value because people can't work with you if they don't know you exist. They just
Hmm.
can't. Like, no one can give you money, no one can buy your product, no one can hire your services if they don't even know you exist. So you
Right.
could be the perfect solution, but if they don't know you, they can't find you. You mentioned earlier, you were talking before recording. You're like, "Hey man, I didn't come across your podcast. You've done these episodes, but I've never even seen your podcast, right?" That's on me, right? But even though it took 7, 8, 9 years for you to find me, we found me now. And that's
Yeah.
part of it for us with the content, because content works when you're not. And that's one of the benefits is someone can be listening to this, today, tomorrow, 10 years from now. I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey man, I've been listening to your podcast for years, and they've never reached out to me, but they've been listening for years, right? And they've gotten to know me, and they feel like they do know me because they do know a lot
Yeah.
about me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though it's my first time meeting them, they've gotten to know
Right.
me. So there's a lot of value in that. So for me, because we're raising money from people, that takes time to build that trust. For someone to want to invest with you and write fairly substantial checks, that takes time. So definitely having these platforms help. With that said, even if you're not investing, I still think it's important to build a personal brand, mainly because technology has evolved so much. And technology is one of those things that is becoming a gatekeeper. If you're ever applying for a job or anything like that, there's so many tools in place that really circumvent the process. And if you don't meet their criteria, you don't even make it to the second phase. And you want to find ways to take more control. But the best way to do that is to be able to stand out in the marketplace, to have a brand where people already know who you are. You have a reputation for certain things. They're seeking you out as opposed to the other way around. I'll give you one little example. And this is not a well, let me say this too. A personal brand is not the thing. It's not being
Yeah.
a podcaster. It's not writing a blog. A personal brand is just what people think about you when you're not in the room to speak for yourself. And an example of that, I've got my restoration business. I was looking to hire a brand or a business development person. And there's someone who's very well known. in our industry. She made a comment on this individual's LinkedIn page saying she's one of the best business development persons she's ever trained and worked with, and she happened to be in my city. So I reached out to her, right? I didn't, post a job and wait for her to apply or anything like that. Like, I saw that comment from a highly reputable individual in this space, and that was enough for me to say this person must be really, really good. For this person to leave a comment like that, me, this person is really good. That's a personal brand. The personal
Right.
brand is what others say about you. So we should all be thinking about that. Maybe you're not doing it as publicly, but I will tell you this, the person who made that comment does have a personal brand, does comment publicly, and that's how I knew her. So
Mm,
all of these things stay connected. And at the end of the day, we are now a global economy. We've got the internet to help us reach anyone across the world. So your opportunities are only limited by your own mind. I've got people on my team on the other side of the country. I've got investors in multiple countries all around the world. So I'm no longer limited to just trying to talk to people in my community. I can talk to people all over, but it takes your voice, it takes your presence, it takes technology to be able to reach an audience. So it's really important to build a personal brand if you want to stand out.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what you're talking about, people coming up to you that you've never met, but they've been listening to you, watching your show. Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. I mean, I've experienced that at, different in-person events and things like that. And initially it was kind of weird.
It's very weird the first time it happens. And you can tell because they don't lead with that. They just come up super friendly. Hey,
Right.
John. And I'm like, who is what? Who the hell is this? So it throws you off for a minute, man. And in full transparency, I actually did that to someone else, which is when I realized how powerful this was. I met a guy,
Mm,
Reed Goosens, who became my first business partner, one of my first syndications. We were at a conference. We have the same mentor, so it's his event. So I knew him. So it wasn't like fanboy, and that's not what I mean. But I had been listening to his podcast. So I felt very familiar with him, and my coach talked about him a lot as well. So the first time I met him in person, I was like, "Hey, Reed, how you doing, man?" And I realized we had never had a conversation. We had never met. He didn't know who the hell I was, and his
yeah.
face told me that. His face was like, and I was like, "Oh, let me stop. Hey, man, I'm John," and filled in the gaps for him so he'd understand. Oh, okay, now I know why you're so jovial and cordial, right? But that was the moment, and he's actually the guy who convinced me to do a podcast because I was under the belief that, and this was like 2016, by the way. I was
Mhm.
under the belief that the world did not need another podcast, and that was 10 years ago. So imagine what
Oh
what people
man,
think
so
today.
many. Yeah.
So here's what he said to me, though. He said, the world may not need another podcast, but your network, the people who believe in you, the people you care about, they need to hear from you. When you talk about, for me, investing, when you talk about regular everyday people with a chance to invest in apartments without being a landlord themselves, that sounds like a fantasy.
Mhm.
It sounds like BS. So they need to see and hear someone like you doing it, walking the walk, and showing them how it is possible. And if the people in your network see you doing it, it can become a reality. If they see Reed or someone else, they don't know Reed. So it's just another random dude on TV show or talk show or a podcast or whatever, right? But if they see me doing it, wow, okay, maybe this is possible. And that really shifted my entire thought because it's not about building this massive audience. It's about reaching the people closest to you that you know
Mm,
you can impact. And if you can do that, it is absolutely worth writing that blog, launching that Facebook group, launching that podcast, that YouTube channel. It is absolutely important because if those people see you doing it, you can make a massive influence in their lives.
yeah. Do you have any in that vein, do you have anything of advice? I know I have a lot of feelings for people that maybe they want to start something, but they don't know what. Because again, there's a lot of people that start things and it fizzles out
Yeah.
after like 3 episodes. But that's because their why for doing it is weak, right? Like, do you have a passion for this or are you just doing it because you thought it would get you attention?
You definitely need to have a clear vision of why you're doing it. Um, attention is a terrible reason to to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in the roundabout way, I know what you mean by that. But if it's for vanity reasons, I guess is what I'm saying, then you shouldn't do it,
Yeah.
right? Don't do it for
Yeah.
vanity. But if you're
Yeah.
doing it because you know you can really reach people, teach them, educate them, partner with them, grow your business through this means, absolutely, right? And you just have to stay focused on that. If it's a medium
Right.
where you can connect with people and grow your business, then yes. If it's not business related and it's something else, then sure, you can still do it, but it may just take on a different meaning. The biggest thing for me was I know the power of real estate investing, but I also know many people have a hesitation to it.
Mm.
And it really allowed me to help other people get into real estate, but also it forced me to truly become an expert. And it
Mm.
forced me to overcome my own, imposter syndrome and
Hmm.
these limiting doubts. Because when you're talking to people all the time, I mean, like you said, I'm at like 785 podcast episodes now, right? Well, guess what? I don't like to call myself an expert, nothing like that. That sounds crazy, but you learn a lot. You're going to learn a
Yeah.
lot. If you do this every week, you sit down, you talk to other people, you're going to learn. You have no choice but to learn when you're interviewing investors every day. You're just going to learn, right? When you're creating content, when you're trying to teach other people, you're going to learn because you don't want to be stupid and you want to make sure you actually understand. So, whenever I'm writing a post or creating content, I actually have to stop sometimes. And I know what I know, but sometimes I have to stop and say, let me research just a little bit more just to make sure maybe this is different in Texas or Florida or a different state. So it forces you to really become knowledgeable on subjects. And that actually makes you much better at the thing you do. When we talk about hiring property managers, yeah, when I started out, that's what people said. Guess what? I hired some bad property managers and I learned, okay, is it that they're bad or was I bad at managing the property manager? Did I do a poor job of vetting the right property manager for my asset? Did I not ask the right questions? I've gone through all those steps. And if I can make a little plug, that's the reason I put together the 7 questions guide, because most people have so many blinders that they don't know the questions to ask. So going through that guide, the 7 questions you must ask before investing in apartments, that helps you maybe identify some of those blind spots and get the right answers. But the thing I will tell you is create the content that you want to create and you know people are looking for, but do it because it helps someone. Don't just do it because you think it's cool and funny. Do it because you know somebody is looking for it. And then it just becomes a matter of finding who that person is and
Right.
solving their problems, because you're not going to help everybody, but there's
Yeah.
somebody out there who's at, I mean, if you just look at what people are Googling, that's your key. Okay. If people are Googling, hey, what do I do with $50,000 or how to invest 50K or how to invest in apartments or whatever the question is, that's that's your content, right? If you can answer those, if you know the answer, then you answer that question, those questions, create that content, and you're going to be in a good spot.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You got to figure out what you can keep doing for 9 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or even 4 years.
yeah,
But the way I've approached it is doing it based on people and like what they have to say, not about what I have to say. I can respond after they say something, but if it's constantly about my knowledge, well, that's only as much as I know. So if I'm trying to give everybody good advice based on my knowledge, I mean,
yeah.
that's pretty limited.
Well,
Like,
Evan, here's the cheat code. The cheat code starting out is to do an interview based platform.
yeah,
And the reason is what you just said. It's not relying on you to be the expert, right?
exactly.
It's very different if I say, hey, Evan, tell me about parking, right? Parking at apartments. I don't have to know anything about parking at apartments, right? I'm gonna answer you, ask the question, let you answer it. And now I can take that content, I can create it. So that's what I did for so many episodes, right? Until I got to the point where I started to know more, as much as my guests, if not more than my guests. And now most of my guests, I do know a lot more about this particular topic. So we shift and talk about other things, scaling, or getting to $1 billion in real estate, or managing teams, or managing scale. So you can shift to make it more fun, and that you do need to continue to evolve because your
Right.
audience should evolve with you as well. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're trying to start this right now, you're like, this sounds great, but I don't know where to start. Keep it simple and bring
Yes.
on people to interview that you would love to talk to. And I'll tell you this, I did my first 6 episodes. Let me run this down. Episode number 1, I interviewed a guy named Triffin Christoforou. I had one question I wanted to get answered. Okay. And it was, where should I be looking to invest in Cincinnati? Every broker I spoke to in Cincinnati, they would just pitch their deal. Oh, the west side of Cincinnati is great. Oh, the north side of Cincinnati is great. Oh, the east side of Cincinnati is great. And I'm like, I didn't know, right? I didn't live here. So I finally got this broker on. I'm like, well, he doesn't have a deal in front of me. I'm going to ask him the question, see if he answers. Well, he did. He told me where to go. The next property I bought was in that market where he told me to buy. And by the way, he sold that property for me a few years ago, and he just sold me another property. That property I was just telling you about that I just bought that I'm the note PM. He sold me that property. Episode 1, he was guest number 1. Episode number 2, a guy named J.R. Foster. J.R. did the loan for that property that I bought. Okay. Episode number 3 was I don't remember who that was. Oh, that was no, 3 was JR, 2 was Andrew. Andrew was my other partner on that 192 unit syndication deal. I did a conference with the person who was like my either 4th or 5th podcast guest. Like the 7th and 8th guest was my mentor. The 7th one was Reed, the guy who I met at the conference. So I've literally 6 of the first 10 guests I've had, or 6 of the first 8 guests, I really strengthened that relationship with them to the point we did business together, right? I mean, I launched a conference with one of those guests. What's my point? I don't care if no one ever heard the podcast.
Right.
I got a chance to sit with people I wanted to build relationships with, and I did. So from there, everything was gravy because I created a foundation with these relationships now where I did business with one told me where to buy and became a broker of mine. One did my loan. One I ended up launching a conference with, is one of my really good friends now. One became a mentor. 2 we partnered on a deal with. That's 7 of the first 9 podcast guests. That's insane. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So use the podcast for that. And that's how I do an interview base. And it doesn't have to be a podcast, but if you're going to do something and you don't know what to do, take the emotion out. Just ask them, if you could just interview and build relationships with 10 people, who would they be? And then use this as an excuse to go sit down with them for 45 minutes to an hour and ask them whatever the hell you want to ask them. And you will get great value out of that.
Right.
And you're going to build a strong rapport out of that as well.
Absolutely. And what you said, like those people that you initially interviewed have been instrumental in like your success and where you're at now. It's so true. Like everybody I interview, I'm not so worried about who's going to see it or how many people are going to listen or whatever. That'll either happen or not happen. I have no control over that, really. What I really care about is the person I'm talking to and making sure that they feel valued in this this interview, this being a part of my show, because I can control the future state of continued relationship with that person, you know, like, and something coming of that because they saw value in me and I saw value in them. Right. But to say, you know, thank you for being on for my sake so that I can get more people to watch me. You know, I think that's so often what people are trying to do versus I think if you've done it a while, you realize there's so much value in just focused on the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, spot on, man. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I there's so many great people I've met and talked to and learned from. And when I go places, I make sure I connect with them. So it is a fun thing to do once you've done it a while.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I can't tell you how valuable it is. And the other reality is it pushes you out of your comfort zone, but it pushes you upward and forward, right? It's challenging you to do something that's going to put you in front of maybe an audience that you otherwise wouldn't be in front of, and it's going to create opportunities for you. So I think it's smart. And to your point, Don't worry about downloads or views or none of that stuff. Focus on the person in front of you, build that relationship, build that rapport, and take it from there.
Yeah, because like you said earlier, they'll be the person talking about you in that room you're not in.
Absolutely. That's it. That's it.
So, and that's a big deal. So, well, John, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate you downloading some of your wisdom and your learning as you've been an investor and now a supplier to the industry of multifamily. That's probably a whole nother area we really haven't touched on, but you're in the early stages ish, and it'd be interesting to hear about how that's been going, and in a future, maybe in a few months when we've got a little more time under your belt.
There you go.
But yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for jumping on with me, and just like John jumped on Boss Talks, he has a show. I have a show. It's a great opportunity to be a guest. So if you want to be the boss of Boss Talks, jump on with me, share your insights, your wisdom, your leadership style. And it doesn't matter if you're a entry level person in the industry or you have your own business and you invested in real estate. Everybody's story is valuable and we all can learn from each other. So jump on with me and we'll make it happen. Thanks for watching.